Ritu, welcome to Stories in AI. How are you today? Is it sunny in Boston?
I can't claim it to be sunny. We're expecting a nor'easter. So thank you, Ganesh, for asking. But we Bostonians love it. So I'm not complaining either. And
That's
yeah,
awesome.
my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
That's awesome. Ritu, why don't we start off with your personal story? Talk us about your journey. I know what fascinates me is you're an analyst right now at IDC, and you run the entire, the research community for that. But you also have a lot of experience as a practitioner in the industry, right? So give us your story if you don't mind.
Sure, absolutely. So before I start sounding aged or ancient, I've been in the industry for over 25 years. And over these years, I've been extremely privileged to actually have had the capacity or the opportunity to work for very large organizations as well as smaller organizations. And as you rightfully said, before I joined IDC, I didn't know what analyst really did. This is my first time becoming an analyst, but I've been majority of my career has been a practitioner. I actually started my career as a developer, but I was always very curious as to why am I doing this? What is it going to impact, and how is it going to impact? And I am extremely grateful to my manager who, spotted my curiosity and said that I think you will be better fit for a product management role. So the majority of my career has been a product management, and I also have had the opportunity to work for, a management consulting firm like PricewaterhouseCoopers and, working across hundreds of customers worldwide and gaining so much firsthand for them. And then, just before I joined IDC, I was the chief product officer of a high-tech startup. And for my own personal reasons, I was kind of, enjoying my gigs and trips to Israel, but it was too much after 4 years. After I got the company into a good state, I think I had to move on. And so I moved on to IDC, and I'm enjoying my gig here as well right now.
That is awesome. Now, give us a flavor for what your gig is all about, right? I mean, there's research, there's consulting, there's a whole gamut of things. So give us a flavor for it.
Sure, sure. So in my current role, I'm basically leading the AI and automation research practice here at IDC. And part of our job is definitely to do the market research, but we also do advisory services. That's what you kind of call as consulting. So in the market research, we are kind of following the future, tracking the future, what's really going to happen, all the cool stuff. And I am so, so excited that I get the opportunity to work with some of the brilliant minds at IDC, and we're covering, the entire technology stack of AI. So there are colleagues in the company who are focused on the infrastructure side. There are colleagues in the company who are focused on the cutting edge software side. But I personally focus on actually bridging the gap between the technology and the business side. So a lot of times, as you and I were chatting just before we started this session, is that people get into the extreme technical details, which is important, and don't get me wrong. But, we really was looking at that there was a big gap that AI, a lot of times people just bucket it into a technology thing. But for AI adoption to grow, organizations have to be ready. There has to be a cultural shift. Organizations really need to know the C-suite. I started off building an AI strategy program where I spoke about what are the business changes that the organizations have to go through? How do they kind of find the strategy? Who are the personas who are going to be involved? How do they decide which cases to prioritize? How do they kind of measure the business outcomes? So my research is actually focused on 20% on the future, 40% on the business side, and 40% on the core software, which covers the entire gamut, right from conversational AI to computer vision to the machine learning whole life cycle. But my team members, they focus much more deeper into each of these areas. And as you know, IDC is very, very well positioned in having industry specific analysts. So we actually, a massive amount of transformation is happening in those areas. So I get the opportunity to collaborate with them, whether it is in the retail side or whether it is in the financial services or manufacturing, and learn, how you could leverage AI to kind of make an impact. And we also have feet on the ground across the globe. So I get to collaborate with all the regional analysts as well.
That's amazing. You have such a unique vantage point on what's happening across the globe. And I love what you said, which is like 20% on the future and then 40% on the business value and what's happening today in the market. So let me ask that back to you, right? What is the state of the industry with AI, right? And I know like 5, 6 years ago, if we were talking, people were trying to experiment and trying to learn about AI. The conversation has shifted pretty dramatically, right? So give us your lay of the land. Where is enterprise AI today?
I think that's a brilliant question. I remember in 2018, if I'm not mistaken, or early 2019, I was speaking at an end user conference in Florida. And I remember we had such fun because there was only, a very tiny fraction of the audience who actually believed. And the rest of the people, they were asking me that I'm just doing some AI washing there. And, it's not real. And they were really asking me, is this just about taking pictures of cats and dogs and recognizing that? And it was hilarious, right? And there were a lot of conversations about kind of dismissing it completely, that it's a hype. But today, I think 2020 was the year that truly strengthened the value of enterprise AI. I have to say that, while the pandemic caused a lot of challenges for a lot of us, and it's still going, but it actually accelerated the enterprise AI adoption. And we all know that it is, there's tremendous amount of potential, but it was also important for organizations to kind of, take that leap forward, take that, innovation quotient forward. So today, actually, on an annual basis, I run an annual buyer review survey. So when I ran the survey in 2019, off the top of my head, I think it was less than 10% of the initiatives which were in production. And it was a global, of 2000 buyer personas. And today, when I ran it in 2021, it was almost like threefold increase, 3x increase, 33% of the initiatives were in production. And I'm anxious to kind of run this year and see how it goes, because I'm expecting that it must have changed dramatically. Um, Even when AI is generating value, it still has a lot of challenges. But I actually would like to quote something from an interview that I recently was watching. I don't know if you have watched it. Maybe you have. At the Fortune Brainstorm AI 2021,
Yes.
the CEO and chair of Accenture, Julie Sweet, was being interviewed by the Fortune editor. And there was a session there where she was asked that, what do you think? Where is the enterprise? Where are the enterprises with AI? And she kind of, she very articulated it very well, which I subscribe to that. That she said, today organizations don't have a choice. The organizations who were already in the journey of digital transformation, they were really, really kind of making difference, but that percentage was so tiny. So then came in the era of, compressed transformation because people had to kind of be resilient and survive. These organizations, they actually started doing, making rapid use of these technologies. And she said it that cloud is the enabler, data is the driver, and AI is the differentiator. So, you can actually use cloud.
Brilliant.
And before cloud is available, and we also seen that cloud and AI is driving a virtuous cycle of software transformation. And, people have their own private data or their own, data. But tomorrow, people will have access to third-party data, and data will be commoditized. It's how you use this data to create
Yep.
personalized experiences, recommendations, But what was much more interesting, and I subscribe to that very passionately, is that gone are the days when people are going to be using AI just for operational efficiency or cost reduction. Even my survey actually indicated that, organizations are looking to create innovation out of AI. How can they change their business models? How can they change their business processes? It's not lift and shift. When people were initially moving to the cloud, it was like, okay, how can I virtualize it? How can I, use it, for microservices architecture? But the conversation has gone to the other level. How could you use a collective set of data to actually kind of empower different kind of experiences? And every day I talk to the startups as well as to the end users. It's just fascinating as to how, the innovation is happening. So my key message here is that the enterprises, while there are a lot of challenges, and we'll talk about some of the challenges, it's kind of in the journey of innovation. And if I may share with you, it's a little bit still in works, but I am kind of hypothesizing that organizations who are in the higher adoption maturity, so I have my maturity scale for AI, I put them under 5 stages. On the left hand, no surprise, they are the laggards. On the complete right hand side, they are the disruptors and the transformers. Stage 4 and 5. And my hypothesis is that who are in stage 4 and 5, they have a higher AI innovation index. And because of that, they will have a longevity on Fortune 500 or Global 2000, and they'll have sustainable competitive advantage. So I'm trying to work on this, but this is resonating very well with a lot of my, customers and vendor community that I'm working with. But I completely agree with what Julie was saying, that the future is actually heading, and it's not just the future like in 5 years, it's starting to happen today, but in the next 2 to 3 years, it's actually going to be more focused on the innovative aspects of the business.
No, that's fascinating. That's what a great perspective, Ritu. And to summarize or like translate to myself, right? One thing I can definitely, you're absolutely right. Right, you're moving from, hey, AI is the easiest way to sell into IT for any organization was, I'm gonna lower your costs, right? And so that's where everybody started, which is saying, hey, AI or automation can automate a lot of those things and stuff like that. So now that conversation has shifted. I love that quote you mentioned, right? Data, cloud is the infrastructure, data is the driver, and AI is the differentiator, right? So now more and more businesses that I'm also engaged with are always looking at it saying, how can I create a quantum leap in what I do today? How can I do things differently? It's not just looking at, everybody started doing this, like, I do something manually. Can I automate it using machine intelligence? Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the Me Too part of this thing. Now, some of them who in that 4 and 5 of your maturity spectrum are also thinking, I've already done that. Let me just unlock new value within the data. What are the unknown unknowns in the data, right? Things like that. But the other thing that you mentioned that really is fascinating is that hypothesis on your maturity curve, and the leaders in 4 and 5th stages are gonna continue to have, they're gonna have a longer longevity in the S&P 500. It's another way to say that the value with AI related business processes or AI in general, it compounds over time, right? So the earlier you start, it's the brilliant the nuance of compounded interest, because these are systems that learn from data, and the more you put that in production, the more you learn from those mistakes, and the more you learn from that experience. So I think it's fascinating you say that. I think I'm looking forward to that hypothesis coming out as a research report or something. But I think it's you're so right. AI's value compounds, so that means companies who have already gone to the other end may actually stay there longer. It's going to be harder for others to catch up, right? And the other way, the other thing that I actually also think about in this regard is, it's hard to actually compete in the age of AI. Even now, the field is, wide open. There's still a lot of things that most companies can do to get to there, but there will be a time in the next 5 to 6 years where it's going to be impossible to gain a leadership over someone who's already in 4 or 5, right? So thanks for sharing that. I think, let me ask the flip side. You talked about the challenges in adoption today, right? What are you seeing? What are you viewing? What does your research tell you in terms of what are those buckets of challenges that organizations are dealing with?
Yeah, happy to. So we've been doing this research for the last, 4 to 5 years on a regular basis, an annual global basis, and also in midterm. Sorry. And I see that most of the time, initially people, data continues to be a big problem, right? Data readiness, right? People
Sure.
don't really know where the data is, but it's nothing new. Organizations have had this problem since ages, right? The nuance comes here is that in this case, because a lot of value is going to be extracted from unstructured data. In our research, we see that most of the organizations are just focused on the master data and the transactional data, and they're not tapping the value, you look at use cases by use cases, whether it is in finance, whether it is in retail, whether it is in healthcare, in manufacturing, everywhere the real value has to be extracted by unstructured content. And organizations have not been ready for that. And that's why you see the skyrocket growth of some of these cloud data warehousing companies and all of that. And we'll talk
Yeah.
about it later. So data is there, and the concept of data fabric and data mesh that you hear that people are coming up with. But the other area which people are really struggling with is machine learning operations, right? It took a lot of time people to standardize on DevOps, right? It was not really easy. The data scientists, they were working in isolation. They did not understand. Not only they did not understand. If I have to say respectfully, that they don't want to care about those operations aspect of it, but it's extremely important for scaling it for a company, right? So
Yes.
the coming together of MLOps and DevOps, I have spoken to a lot of customers who told me they actually picked up a DevOps MLOps solution because they had standardized on their DevOps solution, right? And the skill set and talent and all of that. The third area that we see is that, of course, lack of talent, and you'll never have, go after predictions after predictions. You'll never have so much of, data science talent. And it's actually, in some ways, it's important that the data scientists and the business analysts, the line of business people who understand the business, they come together to kind of create the solution, because that's how the human aspect, the know-how of the business comes into. And AI is, I have been a firm believer that AI is all about business value. And because of that, you need to understand the business nuances and not sit in your isolated fancy land and create the best of the algorithms. It's all about putting it to use. And so that is another challenge. The other challenge, there are lots of challenges. A lot of companies tell me that they don't really know where to start. They do not have a strategic alignment. But I also, from a people and a process perspective, if I have to up level it, I think it's a culture challenge, right? A lot of companies, especially large organizations, in a startup world, you have a risk-taking culture. You have a culture of innovation. Sometimes, larger organizations, they completely miss on that and they completely get lost in it. So today I'm seeing and in fact, even Julie Sweet also in her conversation said that the C-suite is now getting very much on top of it, and a significant percentage of the C-suite actually expressed that AI is going to be a very integral part of their strategy, and but they do not know, and they have some paranoia about from the business risks and potential negative impact, and how do they get ready for that? Because until and unless you create the culture of innovation and a culture of risk taking, and with the balance, in a responsible way, it's going to be difficult because people don't know. And the second thing, which I think you also mentioned, is that, Ganesh, is that people are not looking for. There's no point to reinvent the wheel, right? So the hyperscalers, if you think about it, they have created these services, and of course, some of them are very general purpose, and businesses are looking for some optimized services in their industry sector or their particular solutions. And there's a lot of innovation happening in that space, but it's not at the pace at which the end user customers would like. Give them the flexibility, give them the choice. But I think that's going to happen very soon. There are companies who are working on this to kind of create, we'll talk a little bit about the big language models that are being created by OpenAI in all of the world, and that will help accelerate some of these innovations for the businesses. So to summarize it, I would say that it's a combination of some technical challenges as well as the business culture and readiness challenges, from a people and a process perspective.
That's awesome. No, just to summarize, I think I love the way you laid it out, and I think there is a subset of the cultural, the whole business culture kind of or organizational challenges that I want to dive deep into. But the untapped, unstructured data, as you said, just to summarize, number one. Number two, and I love the way you called it like DevOps, and you can actually relate back to how when we were doing DevOps back in the day, say 10 years ago, and how chaotic it was, right? And the same thing comes in. And AI just being such a collaborative science, we have data engineering, data science, you had design people, you have software engineering coming together. You need to bring in those processes to tie it together in a collaborative fashion to get it from just experiments to production, right? I love the talent being a big issue. And I think we're seeing that all over, right? I think it's still, in fact, I if I get a dollar or a dime for every time somebody asks me to introduce them to a machine learning engineer or a data engineer, I'll be really rich right now, right? So it's fascinating. But I think the good news is like that's what we're trying to do: inspire more people to get into the field, right? Get more talent in it. I love how you said the people process, where to start, how do you organize and stuff. And there's a nuance what you said there, and I love the way you framed it, right? In large organizations and established organizations, there is tendency, and rightly so, because then it becomes a risk management function than a risk taking function, right? When you're trying to do anything, you're trying to make sure that I'm not bringing the entire network down with $10 billion of business going through by running a small experiment. But then how do you use AI as an opportunity to bring that experimentation culture into the leadership, into the organization to drive innovation? I think that's fascinating and a very nuanced point that you made. And then the last two, one is, you said like, look, don't reinvent the wheel, just build solutions, help me solve problems, right? Don't give me another platform to deal with, like we talked about, right? Give me applied AI solutions that can solve problems, right? And there's all this great innovation that's happening, like transformer models, as you said, the large language models, and now it can be used for images. There's so many things happening. The one nuance that I'm sure we're going to go there next is on the aspect of culture and helping things, helping organizations come along to solve problems with AI, comes the topic of ethics and responsible AI, right? And it's a hot topic. Everybody's talking about it, and we bounced off a few ideas before we started recording as well. What are you seeing there? So first off, start with a little bit of level setting for everybody, saying what is ethical AI? Why is it important? And what are organizations doing today?
Yeah, I'm smiling because ethical is a little bit of a sensitive word and evokes a lot of emotions. And a lot of people
Yes.
kind of, say, is it related to religion? Is it related to culture and all? So I don't want to go any of those places.
Who's
I
ethics,
personally
right?
believe, yeah. I believe that every company, every organization on this planet has their code of ethics as to what are their moral values, how are they going to operate. And they really have to be kind of, cognizant of that fact that, everything that they're trying to do with, AI, while it generates tremendous amount of value, it can have some unintended consequences. So you need to put your code of ethics, and I remember talking about it and putting together a research in 2019, and a lot of people looked at me that I'm kind of some alien talking about something, just trying to kind of go with the AI washing. But the reality is that every company needs to know that every technology, as it provides you value, it can have unintended consequences. Just the way, just the way we have heard that, when we used to get those robocalls and it was such a, irritation. So there was software created to actually make sure that you could stop it, you could opt out of it, right? It's the same thing that you have to do, that whatever is your code of ethics, are you, if you suppose, if an organization is planning to be more diverse and be more inclusive, and if you're using AI techniques and technology for anything, conversational AI experience, or you're hiring, you really need to make sure that, it has the inclusive capabilities. It has the sensitivity of gender. It has the sensitivity of, different language and different, people coming from different areas and diversity. So it's all about that, right? But then I also think that, with the first stage, what was happening is that when the responsible AI concept was introduced, that you have to do it you have to be responsible, whether you're doing it for your own business or you for doing for the consumers. I think a lot of emphasis was put on the technical side of it, that, go ahead and get your fairness tools and, remember that fair learn tools and all
Explainability
of
and
that.
yeah.
And it was a lot of burden was put on just the data scientists. I think it's unfair. It's not about that. It's a collaborative effort. Every part in the organization needs to come together and understand that what are the consequences. There are instances that I've heard that the data scientists were not aware of, that where these applications were going to be finally used. And if that was exposed to them, perhaps they would have done it something differently, or, taken the right action. So I think initially, we have a framework where we talk about the five pillars of responsible AI: fairness, explainability, adversarial robustness, data lineage, and transparency and everything. But even, all these model ops tools and ML ops tools, they kind of fall short in the overall AI governance, because yes, you're doing the data drift and you're doing the model drift, you're doing the fairness checks and all, which is all important. But the meta point is that how do you mitigate and how do you do AI governance? How do you make sure what are the business risks, and how do you give the business the tools to do proactive risk management? So I'm sure you're watching the industry and you're seeing that there are a lot of innovation happening, and it's very much in its early stages, happening by most of the startups. I haven't seen some very big companies getting too much into the space, even though they have talked about it, right? But the idea is that how do you kind of give business the tools to manage all their business risks, whether it is about discrimination, whether it's about data privacy or non-compliance, and the negative business impacts that the organizations are concerned about, damage to their brand reputation. Can there be a regulatory backlash, and can there be some criminal investigation that can happen against them, or there are hidden costs, right? So I think from an ethics perspective, I very strongly subscribe that it is an organizational play, and it's the responsible AI has to be done aligned with your organization corporate strategy and with all the personas involved, whether it's your legal and compliance officers. I've seen a lot of organizations now having chief AI officer or chief transformation officer. But I personally believe all those roles are important. It has to start with the CEO of the company. The CEO of the company has to kind of embrace that, and AI has to embrace the culture of risk-taking and innovation in a responsible way with the appropriate governance and risk management. Otherwise, I don't want anybody to be a laggard and
Yeah,
be
no,
written
that's
off.
that's fascinating. Fascinating. Just to, summarize, like, responsibly. I love how you started out saying when we started this journey and everybody was talking about responsible AI. Even today, it's reflective of where the industry is today. All the onus is on the data scientists and the technical community to say, hey, make sure you have enough hooks to give me explainability for those models. Make sure that you have fairness. Make sure you have data observability tools that will ensure that the data is not biased and things like that. But not real enough work being done in the industry on really treating this as saying, look, this is going to be a fundamental, almost non-living but intelligent organism that's going to drive a business process. How do you manage the risk that comes with it, right? How do you, just like you have, GRC and processes for other things, you need to have a GRC approach. And thanks for calling out things like regulatory risk that can happen. Like we will have without fail, we'll have the GDPR moment in AI very soon, right? There's enough work happening. And then there's like part of that, I think the governments, all the work that is happening there and all the governments as well. The reputational risk, the nobody wants another taste chatbot, going on Twitter and spewing obscenities, right? And then the other thing that you called out, which is very interesting, is this is a team sport, and this needs to be approached as a how do you drive its CEO down as an organizational risk management while you promote a very experimental and rapidly innovative culture, right? So you got to look at both sides of the spectrum and go in parallel across this thing. Thanks for sharing those insights. That's awesome, Ritu. Now
Yeah,
let me
Ganesh, if
actually
I
get
may, if I
go
may
ahead.
add one, just for the sake of the audience and an example, uh, think about, facial recognition has gotten a lot of, flack, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and so context-driven AI risk management is very important. Like I lose my badge, my company badge all the time. I mean, of course, right now we are not going to the office, but think about it. If, biometrics is used, facial recognition is used to get me inside the complex, I think it will be fantastic, instead of me kind of, logging into 5 different systems and logging into, carrying a bath. I mean, that's pretty outdated. But using facial recognition should not be banned in all the cases, right? I mean, there are some context. So context-driven AI risk management is important, right? So and that is why I say it's a organization level decision, because there are use cases in which it may not be that bad of an issue. It has a lot of potential. So it all depends on that. So
That is awesome. No, that's awesome. Can you share some examples of some organizations that are really balancing that approach very well, or stories? You may not want to name them, but give me some stories, give me some examples for the audience where they're doing it well. I love that example on facial recognition.
yeah, like think about it. There are some of the academics, especially during the pandemic when things went completely upside down for the education system. I have seen a lot of positive sides of the organizations, right? So while data privacy and personal privacy and all was very, very important, but at the same time empowering the students with the right set of knowledge and all was equally important. And that a lot of these academic universities, they leveraged AI in the most beautiful way in terms of being inclusive. So the machine translation tools can provide an inclusive environment for students learning in a second language, because you do not get those special attention. The special needs children, AI powered transcription tools can transcribe classroom lectures in real time for hundreds of enrolled students who are deaf and hard of hearing, right? Those personal touch was missing, and all these. So it was. So these are all very positive. And in this context, just to kind of say one stroke that it is all bad, it's not the right thing. It's the same thing, in the academic setup. I saw that conversational AI tools, and first of all, I have to acknowledge that the chatbots and conversational AI digital assistants, their maturity and accuracy has grown by leaps and bounds, right? I mean, we all remember, 2015 and 16, how it was and how it is today. So students, they're not getting that personal one-on-one touch during the, class. Now they can actually get their answers be answered through, chatbots and digital assistants in real time, and get their students' questions answered properly. So these are phenomenal in the right way of using, without, making sure, of course, they are taking care of that the platform that is being used is devoid of adversarial robustness. It cannot be attacked. There's no manipulation. So all that is being taken care of. But look at the positive outcomes.
That is awesome, Ritu. No, that's so. The world is a lot different now, but it's also what an amazing time to be alive, right? Because it's just the acceleration of all these innovations that led to the moment that we are in right now. So it's fascinating. Why don't we close out with your predictions for 2022? So what do you see in AI across the market? What are your, give me, I know you do a lot of those predictions, but I want to get your thoughts on what those are for 2022 for the audience.
Yeah, so at IDC on an annual basis, we do our top 10 predictions and all. So I'm not going to repeat that. We had a lot of great predictions out there, ranging from what will be the impact of increased regulation, or where is conversational AI heading, or what is going to happen in terms of, the only thing that I'd like to mention from there before I actually talk to you about my, something that we couldn't accommodate that time, and I'll talk to you today. But the only thing that I would like to mention, when initially we started talking about AI, we were very fixated by industrial use cases, right? How it is transforming financial services or healthcare or retail. We are seeing as part of our annual prediction that there'll be an explosion of use cases. AI will be seeping across the business critical functions like sales and marketing and HR and, finance. It is no longer just limited to the back end functions like, IT and security and all. So that was one which I thought it was important, because that cuts through across all industries. But my personal favorite that I would like to share with you, which we couldn't accommodate because we are limited to only 10, is actually the multimodal AI. We all know that computer vision has dominated AI technologies, right? And especially at the edge. And image recognition, by the way, is in AI
Yeah.
training and a lot of synthetic data being used there. But I don't know if you have seen, but I think there was a very interesting video that, folks actually walk into, a fast food joint. And, in the past, you could even when you're chatting, for example, right? It's one thing, right? It's either text or it's either voice. And this particular multimodal AI, there was an avatar which was interacting with the individuals. It could actually not just, see your expressions and recognize your emotions and empathy and change the tone accordingly, right? So I believe that, multimodal AI using different types of data sources, text and audio and video and your eyes expressions and all of that, a multitude of cases, right? So it will change, it's all powered by improvement in language understanding and conversational
Yep.
AI capabilities. But the use cases are like, it can be used in healthcare, it can be used in, for advertising, it can be used in cashless, shopping. The list goes, a 3D fitness coach,
Yep.
as a finance assistant. I feel the multimodal AI will empower this. It's the early stages of metaverse, but it will empower the digital avatar, and which is not just customer service agents. Automated customer service agents have
Sure.
completely exploded, but it is just one tiny piece. It doesn't interact with you, right? In that way, it's just
Yeah.
text. But I believe that multimodal AI will start. It will expand the AI use cases at the edge, like for a customer service kiosk, for healthcare, 3D coach, e-learning, in-store kiosk systems. The list goes on. So I personally believe that we'll see a lot more of it right in here in 2022. We
Yeah.
already started seeing it, and it will be coming in a big way.
No,
I'll
that's
share one
awesome.
more thing,
Sure.
one more thing that I would like to kind of say. This is my favorite prediction, but I'll also see during COVID, when we were all stuck at home and, we're all working from home. And if we run into some kind of an issue, the field service management, right? The whole enterprise service management and field service is a part of it. There'll be an explosion of integration of cross-domain technologies, AI and AR. So think about, whereas a field technician going to you and doing certain service and hold that coordination, they would need some remote assistance help. And with these AI and AR technologies combined together, there are some very innovative startups in this space that can give, from our research, instead of 8 hours to resolve an issue, it took only 15 to 20 minutes to resolve. And in a lot of cases, it empowers me self-service, right? So if I'm working remotely during COVID, I was not happy somebody coming into my house, or even others were not happy to come to my house and if they needed help. So the combination of, I think it will be across domain technologies. It also can be multimodal in that ways, but it will be used for, it's no longer silos that only AI, but AI and then augmented reality, computer vision will actually transform some of the ways of how we live and operate. So that will be my other
No,
one.
that is awesome. No, I think, the one common theme I saw in all the three you mentioned is the pervasiveness of AI, right? I mean, being across everything. And I like to believe that, like, we'll get to a point where people don't ask the question, is it on the cloud anymore, right? And so, because it's assumed that it's going to be in a scalable infrastructure that's globally available, and you don't have to worry about maintaining infrastructure, right? Similar to that, AI is going to be so pervasive that it's going to become invisible, right? And it just be embedded as a fabric into everything we do, be it business process, be it interaction with a virtual bot versus a human who's wearing an AR glasses. And I love that thing. I'm super bullish on that cross domain technology, how the confluence of all these different things can come in. I've invested in a similar company, which is building a virtual real estate marketplace called Superworld. And what they're really trying to do is actually map the physical world in a virtual environment, and then allow creators and builders to build in the virtual place and bring all the things they love about their physical world into the virtual world and experience it through augmented reality and things like that. So it's very fascinating. But to your point, just the cross domain technologies coming together to solve really we're getting closer and closer to humanizing technology to really get that human touch in everything we do. Fascinating.
Yeah.
Great predictions, Ritu.
Yeah, I think I feel very blessed that we are living in some fantastic times to see them. You remember when the first times the series, the Alexas and the Cortanas came?
Yeah.
Uh, we really were able to kind of, get a pulse on it, and it was no longer abstract, right? But things have come such a long way. I mean, that time I remember a lot of people did not realize that it was AI, conversational AI, powering all that, right? I mean, but it was there, and it's just that it will become seamless and very pervasive. And AI, I kind of sense I'm a little bit biased because I focus in this area, but I
Of
strongly
course.
believe that it is going to be the true differentiator for any organization that wants to not just survive, but thrive and be a force to be reckoned with for a foreseeable future.
That's awesome. Ritu, this was such a blast. Where can the viewers and listeners get in touch with you? Where can they find you on the internet?
They can find me on LinkedIn. They can follow me on Twitter. They can shoot me an email on my rjyoti@idc.com anytime.
Excellent. Thanks so much for jumping on the show. This was a blast. I mean, I really enjoyed the conversation.
Likewise, Ganesh, it was a pleasure to see you. And, we should do more of these because it's
We
always
should do more of this. And
exciting to learn
it's
from
a
each other.
like I said, right? I mean, AI is such a community oriented technology. I mean, this is the only way to do AI, in my view. So thanks again for taking the time. Ritu,
Thank
we,
you.
we
Thank you.
shouldn't wait for another few years to do this together again. We should do it sooner.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And, thank you. Have a wonderful
All
rest
right.
of the day. Bye bye.
Thank you.